All right, everybody, you just defeated the White Dragon, and you all level up. What did you all get? Well, my Sport Druid looks like they get to animate zombies now, so that's pretty cool. And my Genie Warlock is getting resistance to cold damage and a fly speed. Great, great. And the Barbarian? Yeah, well, since we decided to do narrative leveling, I was thinking that I could have absorbed some of the draconic magic and now be able to do a breath weapon whenever I rage. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you were trying to roleplay that out in game, so great. Let's get together sometime this week and we can flesh out a feature so that it can be all ready by next time we play. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. This video is both about and sponsored by my own supplement article, Narrative Leveling. It's about a new approach to character subclasses and homebrew. Dungeons & Dragons is a powerful narrative tool, and one of the biggest pulls of the game is creating something unique and impactful with our friends. So this 12-page PDF is for GMs and players that want to take more of a reactionary, developmental, and improvisational approach to character subclasses. Of course, I'll get into what narrative leveling really is and how it benefits the game as a whole, and how to approach it in your own games. But at any time, you can check out the link in the description to my website to check it out for yourself. And if there are any comments, as I'm sure there will be, about this just being a part of some feature in some other ttrpg, know that it's not intentional. What is narrative leveling? Narrative leveling is a homebrew subclass, but instead of making it at the very beginning of the campaign, you make it as you go, dependent on character choices and influences through the game progression. The features are not things that they know they will get, but entirely dependent on the choices that they make. When they reach a level where they would normally choose a subclass, they instead choose to narrative level, and the DM and the player get together and decide what kind of feature would fit best in the current story element of that player. For example, we'll look at an example in the PDF. We'll look at Marty the fighter. And Marty at level 3, they had just gotten done by defeating a bunch of lightning elementals, and unfortunately, he had taken a blast to the chest that knocked him unconscious. But this gave Marty an idea, and instead of picking a normal battle master subclass that he had thought that he was going to do in the first place, he chose to narrative level and talked about how this would influence his character from then on. He shared with the DM his idea of this lightning elemental that went into him, influenced him magically, imbuing him with elemental magic that allowed him to channel electricity. They chose to narrative level and to see where the story would take them from there, and got the feature Static Shock, this giving him the lightning lure cantrip and then a warding electrical shock to ward off other creatures that hit him. Later in the story, Marty will battle against this creature that's now living inside of him, and the choices that they make directly reflect on the features that they get over time, eventually learning how to work with it symbolically, as it's fully outlined in the PDF. But this story would not have been possible if they had just chosen a normal subclass. This is also fantastic for a DM who wants their players to interact more with their story. Plot threads and overarching story can now weave more tightly with the narrative of a character. At the same time, players feel more comfortable going outside of the box with their characters and get to explore things and avenues that they may not have had before. It lets player choices determine the subclass features instead of the subclass features determining the character's progression. How things are played out now, the character subclass that they chose at the beginning decides already what the rest of the progression of the character will look like. You will know at level 1 what you will get at level 20. No surprises and no changes no matter what the character chooses during the campaign. Meaning that a sorcerer could try to learn spells outside of their spell list, get infused with some elemental magic outside of their own, or start worshipping a deity as faithfully as some clerics. Even after all of that, as long as the character continues to level up in the subclass that they chose, no other significant features are added due to the phenomena or character choice. You could say, well, why don't they multi-class? And I respond, why should they need to? There are many capstones and other abilities that you will miss out on if you multi-class. Take one level in anything as a druid and say goodbye to being an archdruid. But why can't a druid get warlocky type features in their subclass and leave their main class untouched? And even though most of us don't really think about subclasses in this way yet, Instead of a roadmap that we follow, it's a canvas that we paint on. If a druid makes a deal with a demon, for example, instead of taking a level in Warlock, it is instead represented as a narrative leveling feature in their subclass. Now granted, there are lots of times where multiclassing does make sense, and it does fit the narrative that the character is portraying, but other times it's too harsh with the commitment and the mechanical weight of an entirely new class. You may also say, well, what about boons or dark gifts or feats? To that I say, those are absolutely great ways to reward player ingenuity and character development. But either there isn't quite the best option that fits for the moment, or the character quickly gets overpowered by both the subclass that they level up in, which they could be making no effort to grow and progress in-game, and the power sets that they are gunning for in the boons and the feats. With narrative leveling, the choices that the character makes is directly reflected in their core features, instead of tack-ons and bonuses. And personally, I think that makes a little more sense. You may say that if an official subclass doesn't work, then you should just scour the internet for something better, something that fits. And we're just back to the same problem, where you get all of your stats at the beginning, no surprises, and your entire character progression is decided before you even start playing the character. How to narrative level. Narrative leveling is actually an easier alternative to DMs because when a player comes to them with a unique idea, they aren't pressured to make an entirely new subclass at the beginning of a campaign. But instead, one feature at a time, the DM observes the interaction between the player and the character and decides with feedback from the player what each feature they get throughout the campaign. At each subclass level up, DMs may ask themselves one of these questions. How is the character going about exploration, social interaction, and combat? How is the character spending their downtime? What resources is the character expending the most? What areas is the character trying to improve? What kind of internal or external forces are influencing the character? What kind of story is the player trying to portray with this character? And what themes are they trying to explore? At the same time, the player decides what kind of things that they want to do in the campaign, and then they roleplay those things out. All of this informs them what kind of features should be rewarded at the time of subclass level up. I can't tell you what this feature looks like as it's different for every table and every character. You'll just have to have a certain level of intuition when it comes to it. But I also included a full page of examples in the PDF that can help you start this brainstorming. Another question you may have is, well, I could see that at level 3 when a fighter gets their subclass, I can see that you have a lot to go on as you've gotten up to level 3 at this point, but what about a character with a subclass that starts at level 1? In this case, take inspiration from their backstory, or just start them off with a regular subclass feature at level 1, and then just continue on narratively leveling at that point. You can also use features from other classes and subclasses as well, but just remember not to step on the toes of other characters if they're trying to focus on a certain aspect. You don't want to keep stealing from those things. If you give one player similar features to another, that other player might feel irrelevant or unuseful. Try to keep main class features to their respective classes, but I also include a lot of things to avoid or not to do in the PDF as well. You can also apply these things to spells and spell lists. Whenever a cleric or a ranger levels up to get new spells, instead of the spells that they get pro bono, you ask yourself what kind of spells would make sense for this character narratively in this instance. If there is other spells, you can help the player tell their story with spells that support it. I don't know how many times I've had to play a character and there were certain spells that just weren't available on my spell list that would have fit perfectly for my own character concept. And you may say, okay, well, all of this so far is well and good, but what if a player kind of abuses it and throughout a campaign, their story is just all over the place, meaning that they make a whole lot of different decisions that kind of mix and mash and make their subclass a little all over the place when it comes to features? Well, that's okay, and really that's the whole purpose of narrative leveling and makes it more relevant. I go over another example in the PDF about an ice sorcerer who was born with ice magic, but quickly learned how to wield a blade from their party members. But then later they want a companion, so they get a wolf companion. And then after that, they decided that they wanted to explore more elemental magic, so now that they can imbue more of these types of damages into their sword. So you have magic, melee, a wolf companion, and alternate types all kind of mashed together in one subclass. But somehow it works because you have room to play with narrative leveling to give them features that meet their ambitions. How many times have you had to tell a player no simply because something didn't mechanically make sense? You create a bond with a creature during the game? Well, sorry, you can't have an animal companion because your subclass doesn't allow that. But instead, give your players more freedom by taking a developmental, reactionary, and improvisational approach to character leveling and Homebrew subclasses. Again, if you want to check it out for yourselves, it's free to all my Patreon subscribers, or you could find it on my website linked below in the description. 12 pages where you can find 2 full subclass examples, lists of things to help you inspire you in your own game as the campaign progresses, as well as tips to implement them at your table. Now stay tuned for even bigger things when it comes to next month for my Patreon members. But in the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of D&D and make the world a better place, both on and off your tables. See you in the next one.